Hi there, my name is Mark. I'm from Apicultural and I'm here today on the rooftop of Lewis Silkin, 5 Chancery Lane, to do an inspection of their 2 beehives. I manage the bees here on behalf of St Mary's Secret Garden. They're a charity based in Hackney that deliver mental health and well-being projects through horticulture, urban greening and other outdoor activities, beekeeping being one of them. Lewis Silkin are one of St Mary's corporate sponsors who sponsor the work the charity do, and in return St Mary's have 2 of their hives here on the Lewis Silkin rooftop, and Lewis Silkin get a modest supply of honey every year from the beehives here as part of their sponsorship programme. This is the view that our bees have here of Chancery Lane. That's the college next door, the Law Society across the street. And that there is the Royal Courts of Justice. You have the London Eye over there. And in the distance you can see the city. We have 2 beehives here at Chancery Lane. These are national hives, which are the commonest type of beehive used in the UK. They're basically a stack of boxes that the bees live in with a mesh floor and a roof. They're currently strapped down with ratchet straps because it gets very windy up here in winter and we don't want any roofs blowing off the top of the hives. That's to strap the beehives down so they don't blow away. You can see just in front of the hive we've got a screen, a plastic screen on the wall there. That's basically acts as a windbreak to give the bees a bit of respite from the wind because it can get very windy up here. And whilst the surroundings up here are quite bleak looking, it's all rooftops, it's all slate and brick, and there's not an awful lot of greenery. At street level there is actually quite a lot of greenery around here. There's lots of parks and garden squares. Just over that way we have a large park. You have Coram Fields over there, another large park just there full of flowers, and then just a bit further down where those trees are in the distance is Embankment Gardens, and we've got lots of forage down there, and the big patch of trees to the left is Inner Temple Gardens, which is full of flowers, amazing forage source for our bees here. If you've watched the bees coming out of our hives, you can literally see them making a beeline in that direction towards the flowers at Temple Gardens. So although it looks quite built up here, the forage is actually not bad. There's actually quite a few good gardens around here, lots of parks where they can find the food that they need. Before I open up these bees, I'm going to give them a bit of smoke. Smoke does several things. It calms them down so they're less aggressive and less likely to sting us, and it subdues the bees, makes it easy to inspect them. The reason we use smoke on the bees is in the wild, honeybees nest in tree cavities in the forest edge, and if they smell smoke they think it's a forest fire and their house might be about to burn down and catch light. And then when they smell smoke they get ready to evacuate their nest just in case the fire reaches their nest. And they do the opposite of what we do in our workplace. If there's a fire drill, we're told to leave quickly and calmly, not go back for our belongings. Honeybees do the exact opposite. Honeybees will go to their honey stores and they'll grab as much of their honey as they can and take it with them when they evacuate the nest. And that's because they need enough food in their stomachs to last them a few days until they can find a new home if they did have to abscond the nest. And the honey is also their raw building materials to build a new nest. They convert that honey into wax using glands in their abdomen and produce a new honeycomb for them to build the nest around. So when we smoke the bees mostly rush to where the honey stores are and start gorging themselves on the honey. And when they're too busy doing that, while they're busy stuffing their faces with honey, they're too busy to bother the beekeeper who's inspecting them. And also once they're full of honey, they're a bit fat and bloated, and they don't really want to sting you. It's a bit like you having a big Sunday dinner and then you don't want to move afterwards, you just want to sit down on the couch. Honeybees are the same. Once they've had a really big feed, they're kind of much less likely to sting because they feel fat and bloated and lazy. But also it's physically harder for them to draw their sting out because they're sort of fat and bloated with honey. So I've given them a little dose of smoke. I'm going to pull out the inspection board at the back of this hive and have a look and see what's on it. This is the bottom of this hive is a mesh floor, and all the debris falls through, and I can see there's lots of bits of pollen on here. There's lots of ants and things on there running around eating the pollen, but what I'm looking for is signs of varroa mites, and I can't see very many mites on there. There's one or two, but very few. So that's a good sign. That means that this colony doesn't have a particularly bad varroa problem. I'm then going to undo the ratchet strap that's holding the hive together. This is to prevent the hive from blowing away in high winds. You don't want any projectiles coming off the roof and injuring anybody. I'm going to take the lid off the hive I'm going to place it upside down nearby, and then the other boxes that's on top are going to go inside that lid. This is a piece of insulation material to keep the bees warm underneath. This is what we call the crown board. This is basically the ceiling of the hive. I want to take that off. There's a little bit of food on there that's left over from the winter. I'm going to have a quick check underneath, make sure queen isn't on the inside of that roof. I'm going to set the roof down there, and then I've got access to the hive and I can see what is going on. I'm going to start by taking the end frame out. This is a new frame, they've only just started to draw it out. It's new comb. Just pop that there. Using my hive tool, I'm just going to pry the frames apart, slide them back, and then I can have a look inside. And there we have some capped honey. On to the next frame. More capped honey. So this is honey that's left over from the winter. We're now in April. The bees are largely still reliant on their honey stores from last season. Not eating the honey on that frame, that's an empty frame, so that's a frame that the queen can start laying in. Now we're getting into the brood nest. We have eggs in amongst the honey on that frame. This frame is mostly pollen. Mostly pollen. This pollen is where the bees get most of their nutrition from. It's full of protein, fatty acids, lipids, all the essential vitamins and minerals and essential amino acids that they need. It's where they get almost all of their nutrition from. The other part of their diet is nectar from the flowers, which they turn into honey. Nectar and honey is just carbohydrates, it's just energy. It doesn't have very many, it has some of the trace elements and trace vitamins and minerals in it, but it's mostly carbohydrate. So if you think of the honeybee's diet like a sandwich, the nectar and the honey is the white bread, and the pollen is the sandwich filling. It's everything else. It's the butter or this margarine spread. It's your sandwich spread. It's your bit of sandwich meat and cheese. Your lettuce, tomato. You know, all the vitamins, minerals, all the goodness. What I'm doing for this frame is full of brood at all stages, and what I'm checking for is that all the brood is healthy, it's nice and pearly white, there aren't any signs of disease or infection. I'm also checking some of these little cups on the bottom of the frame to make sure they haven't got eggs or larvae in them, because that's a sign that the bees want to swarm. And we're coming into swarm season now, so we need to be checking regularly for signs of swarming. What we have here on this frame is a frame full of pollen. You can see there all the different colours. There's greens and oranges and yellows. There's the occasional patch of red pollen, which is from red dead nettle or from horse chestnuts. There's some purpley coloured pollens in there as well. All different coloured pollens. We've got some bees with their heads and cells there. They're eating some of the pollen, and they eat the pollen and convert it into a milky substance called brood food, which they then feed to the larva. And it's the bee equivalent of a sort of, humans' breastfeeding their babies. They eat the pollen, turn it into brood food, and then regurgitate it or excrete the brood food from glands and feed it to the young bees. That's what all those bees with their bums sticking out are doing. They're eating the pollen to produce brood food to feed to the larvae. Here we have a brood frame, and this frame is mostly sealed brood. In the middle there you can see a bee emerging from its cell. This bee was laid as an egg 21 days ago, and it spent 3 days as an egg and then it hatched into a little grub. And when it was about 9 or 10 days old, it pupated and the bees made a wax cap over its cell. And this is now day 21, and it's chewed the wax cap off the cell and it's crawling out from the cell. It's going to emerge. It'll take it a few minutes, but it'll emerge. And almost as soon as it emerges, it'll beg its nestmates for some food, have a bit of a drink of some nectar, and then very shortly after that, it will begin its life of working for the colony. It will get on down to work straight away, starting off by doing cleaning jobs in the hive, and then after a few days, it will become a nurse bee. It will start looking after the young larvae and the eggs. It might then be promoted to becoming an attendant to the queen and look after the queen. When it's about a week and a half old, it will start developing wax glands and start producing wax, and it might be assigned comb building jobs. When it's about 14 days old, it might become a guard bee, because that's when its venom gland ripens and it can then sting and inject venom, so it might have a guard duty, guarding the hive from invaders like wasps and hornets and other bees. It might become an undertaker bee, which in that case its job is to remove the dead and the dying, the sick bees from the colony and dispose of their bodies. And when it's about 3 weeks old, it'll learn to fly for the first time. It'll go out and become a foraging bee. And the most experienced foraging bees become the scout bees. Now the bees that get the task of going to find new profitable patches of flowers and then return to the hive and telling you, the workers, where those flowers are so they can go and gather more food. So just like your career at a law firm like Lewis Silkin, honeybee has quite a complex career progression. Starts off at the bottom and works its way up to the top. On this frame here we have the queen. She's the large bee in the centre with the green dot on her back. She's not born with a green dot. That's a green dot that we've put on her back using a marker pen. We mark the queen so that to help us find her more easily. Sometimes we might need to do a manipulation of the colony. We might want to secure the queen so we don't lose her. So if she's marked, she's easier to find and keep track of. We also use the mark to tell how old the queen is. We have 5 colours, and we use a different colour each year on a rotation. And the queens live a maximum of about 5 years. And green was 2019's colour, so I know that this queen is coming up to a year old. The queen bee is the mother to all the other bees in the colony. She's the only one that lays eggs that hatch into workers. Workers can lay eggs, but they're not fertile, they'll hatch into male bees. So only the queen can produce the workers. And a lot of people think of the queen bee like a monarch, that she rules the colony, but she really doesn't. You have to think of the colony as a superorganism. The whole colony is the animal. The frames in the hive are the backbone, the spine, the rib cage of the colony. The worker bees are the individual cells in the body that do all the different work, do all the different functions. And the queen is really just the ovaries of the colony. She lays the eggs. She's the one that reproduces, but she's not in charge. The workers are actually in charge of her. The workers collectively make all the decisions. These cells here, we have some eggs. Those little tiny white grain of rice looking things are bee eggs, and next to the bee eggs you might also see some small pearly white shiny larvae, a little C-shaped larva. They're the bee larvae. So here we have a close-up of another frame, and we've got a few bees here that are covered in pollen. They're doing waggle dances. So if you watch the bees that are covered in orange pollen, they're shaking their bodies and then they're twisting in a figure of 8 formation. and they're dancing in opposite directions. One's wiggling to the left and one's wiggling to the right. And they're wiggling for about a second, maybe a second and a half, and they're going more or less directly left or right. So the bee dancing to the left is going 90 degrees away from the direction of the sun as it currently is in the sky, and the bee that's dancing to the right is going 90 degrees to the right of the sun as the sun is in the sky. And the second it's vibrating its body for about a second, just over a second. So that tells you, the bees, that the direction and the length of time it's vibrating its body for is the distance. Every second the bee vibrates, waggles its behind, is about a kilometre and a half, about 1.4 kilometres distance. So those bees are going just over a kilometre to find that orange pollen that they've been finding. It must be a pollen source that's quite abundant because they're going in opposite directions but both finding similar forage. There's also some bees here with pale yellow pollen on their legs, bright yellow pollen on their legs. There's some lovely red colours pollens in there. Again, that's probably from horse chestnut or from red dead nettle flowers. If you look down here, there's some sort of greeny yellow coloured pollen, and there's some slightly greeny blue coloured pollens in there as well. The greeny blue coloured pollen is probably from Spanish bluebells. There's lots of that growing in the centre of the city where we are. We've also got some dark purpley coloured pollens in there as well. And some browns, some beige colours, some sort of lime greens. The pollen is where the bees get all of their nutrition from. It's where they get all their protein, lipids, fatty acids, their sort of starches, proteins, amino acids. Whereas the nectar that they collect is mostly carbohydrates, simple sugars. So if you think of a bee's diet like a sandwich, the nectar, the honey, is the white bread. It's the carbohydrate. It's what gives the bees energy to fly and to fuel the colony's activities. And the pollen is the sandwich filling. It's the lettuce, the bacon, tomato, it's the butter, it might be the bit of cheese that you have in there. It's all the vitamins and minerals. It's all the goodness. That brings our beehive inspection session to an end. I hope you've enjoyed what you've learnt about the honeybees and the fascinating lives that they live. For more information about bees and about other pollinators and about what I and what St Mary's Secret Garden are doing, follow us on social media. I'm Apicultural on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. Or you can follow St Mary's Secret Garden also on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, stmarysSecretGarden.org.uk.